Hello and welcome to Be a Yogipreneur, your podcast to become a self-employed yoga teacher. I'm very honored and a little bit nervous, to be honest. I talked today with Mark Walsh. Mark Walsh is Mr. Embodiment, and he's also my trainer and my coach for my own certification I'm doing right now. I'm in his certification course to become an embodiment coach. And Mark is... he has an awesome biography, and I tried to sum it up a little bit. So Mark is the author of Embodiment, Working with the Body and Training and Coaching, and the Embodiment Meditation. He's also the founder of Embodiment Yoga Principles. He organized the Embodiment Conference. And fun fact, I was actually a participant back then. And Mark was a no-name for me back then. And I joined the conference. I really enjoyed it. And it was such a great experience for me to actually have like this, this overlook about what embodiment actually means and connecting with other people who feel the same. Mark is also very involved right now in supporting the Ukrainians in becoming or overcome trauma that is happening through the war. He's also has a very good knowledge about trauma and how that affects the body. And he's also one of the person that you like or you don't like. And I think that's also one of the reasons why I'm a little bit nervous. His energy is very fiery, very airy, but also very caring. And I really love that combination of caring for the people who are surrounded about him and also being very passionate about what he's doing. With no further ado, Mark, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, pleasure to be here. Not too fiery today. I'm a bit wiped out by heat, and we just did a big self-care event, which ironically has left me a bit tired. So probably get the slightly sleepier version of me than normal. But happy to be here.
It's beautiful. And you just said like you just came out of one of your events. I'm very struck by how many events you're actually like organizing. I feel like I'm part of the newsletter, and it's like one event and one training after another that you're organizing. And I have a high appreciation for that you're really much in this giving. And the first question I actually have right now, what is coming up from my curiosity is, how do you manage to have so many ideas about new trainings and new ideas what you want to share with the world?
Yeah, I mean, I love the field of embodiment, so ideas isn't a problem. I'm always having ideas. I think the question is really like how to make them happen in a sustainable way. And there's a small team of us who do it. Steve and Leela, who put on this event, for example, my colleagues, and it gets a bit easier as well. Like for us, putting on an event for 10,000 people or whatever, like this week, it's not that big a deal. The Embodiment Unlimited, that's the name of the company, the Embodiment Unlimited team, we're used to it now. It's hard work, but it's like Steve can put a page together in a few hours, to do an event, and it's relatively straightforward for us to book teachers and to make it happen. Teaching is still the bit that I love most. But we've sort of got good enough, as it were, on the marketing and business skills to be able to produce these things.
And what you just said is that you enjoy the teaching the most. And I think a lot of my listeners and people from my community, they can see themselves as somebody like that as well. Like especially yoga teachers, they love to be a yoga teacher and they love to teach. How do you manage to be so much and have so much passion about teaching and also have the company that you have?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes it's difficult, and I have this fantasy of just being a teacher, but in the grown-up world, that is mostly just a fantasy. There's very few people who are in some, maybe you get some well-paid job, or you're at a studio and I try yoga or something where you're going to get a kind of shoveled students every day. But generally, that's not how it works for most of us, whether you're small operation, large thing. I think it's sort of like, I just think of it as just being a grown-up. Like, I'd rather not do the washing up right? I don't mind washing up, and it makes, it means my kitchen's not a mess, so I do the washing up every day. It's not a big deal,
Yeah.
So I think like a minimal amount of the work is like that, though I think it is a fine balance. And there's definitely times when I'm not teaching enough, and then I sort of lose connection to like the passion for it, or like why I do it. And then like the last 3 days I was teaching quite a bit, and it's like, oh yeah, this is what I love, this is why I do it. And then it's like, okay, I have to link the other stuff to that. And this is a fine line that can go too much of one way or the other. Mostly I see people making the opposite mistake, which is just thinking they can teach or coach or whatever the modality is. And as one of my students said to me, what I learned about marketing from you was to do some. Because if people did even an hour a day, I don't mean like twiddling around on Instagram, proper stuff, then they'd probably be in a much better position. And there's a sort of arrogance to saying, like people should just come to me because I'm amazing. And unless you've been around 30 years or you happen to be in a very lucky position, it's not the way it's going to go.
Let's talk about embodiment, because that's what you're teaching. And I'm curious, what does embodiment mean for you? Because when we translate it in German, it's like being in the body. It's like we don't really have a word for it. Yeah. So I'm curious, what does it mean for you?
I teach a lot in different countries, and translation's quite often an issue. And in some ways, I've sort of over the years helped define the word in the modern context, because in different contexts, it means different things, like anthropology or robotics. It has very specific meanings in different contexts. So in the body-mind field, I'd say it's an umbrella term for all the body-mind arts. So all the arts like yoga, conscious dance, martial arts, that involve the body, but the body is part of who we are. So for example, I go to the gym, I do exercise, nothing wrong with that. But when I'm in the gym, most people in the gym aren't trying to develop themselves. They're just trying to get bigger biceps or fitter, cardiovascular, whatever. Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, right? It's like, fine, you want big biceps, it's great. But it's exercise. And yoga's got a bit confused in the yoga's a mindfulness practice of being aware of the body, right? Embodiment would be being aware as a body and developing oneself through that. So whether it would use the word or not, a lot of yoga has come from that background. And then for other people, yoga is exercise, which again, I'm not against. I YouTube, yoga, and sometimes it'll be like yoga for a better butt or something like that. And I go, okay, great. You want a certain shaped ass, I'm fine, go for it. But I'm not against that. It's good for you. But it's so now we've got this one word yoga in inverted commas actually means very different things.
Yes.
Because I'm not talking about the style of yoga, I'm talking about the aim or goal of yoga. And some of them have more, esoteric kind of, unify with the consciousness of the universe. There's this more kind of spiritual background, and they're all good. And I actually go to different yoga classes that have different aims, some of which are more physical, some of which we could say more spiritual. And it's very difficult as well, because nobody likes anyone telling anyone what to do, to say, well, this is yoga, or this is embodiment. Well, I would say yes to an extent. Embodiment is different things for different people. So subjective sense of the body, an umbrella term for the body-mind arts. We could say it's a type of intelligence that includes body awareness, but more than that. I've mapped that out in my books and courses and things, like what exactly that is. But it's not anything. I mean, it's not an aardvark. Like a synonym for embodiment is not cabbage, right? So it's a little irritating to me that I see the hashtag embodiment being used on Instagram. It's sort of a trend a little bit in yoga to just throw the word embodied in front of anything and then say, oh, it just means better than yours, Yeah. So I think slightly, I have a whole chapter in one of my books defining the terms. So that's the quick definition, the subjective study of the body and all the form of intelligence, all this big umbrella grouping, because we know something like conscious dance or martial arts have something in common with yoga, and there wasn't really a word to talk about that. So when I wanted to do events that included all those things, or people say, what are your influences? And I'd say, well, it's yoga, it's meditation, it's conscious dance, it's Aikido, and I needed a word for that. So embodiment was sort of the nearest one out there.
Okay, understand. You mentioned your book. I don't have the big book with me. I left it in Bali. But I have your small PDFs here with me, working with the body and training and coaching and the embodiment.
Laminated. Look at that. It's printed out and laminated. This is the organized German version. I love it.
No, I did it in Bali, actually. It's super cheap to do that.
Okay. So it's the Bali version.
It's the Bali version, the Bali German version, you know. So yeah, what you just said about yoga is such a big umbrella, and like you can do yoga as an embodiment practice, mindfulness practice, and also like as a practice to just train your body. I find that really interesting because one of the things that you put a focus in our training, in our certification, is actually even when you are a yoga student or yoga teacher, to embrace another practice. And when I joined your training, I was thinking like, I'm a yoga teacher. I already have my practice. Ta-da, I'm embodied. And I think in one of your books, you actually wrote down, when you think you're embodied, you're actually not. And I still think about that quote because every time I'm thinking like, I'm so much in my body.
If what's embodiment, not what you think, right?
Yes.
Like there's a bumper sticker in that somewhere. I think I'd seen that in BMC originally, which is another practice. Yeah, I mean, the idea here is that in a way we're all a bit provincial, to use a slightly judgmental word. I came from a Aikido background originally, and I thought, okay, this has everything, you know. And now on one level that's true. Everything, if you go deep enough, contains everything else, sure. But we could also look at it like, what are the skill sets being developed? And you know, I remember I was at Tara Judel's class in London at Tri Yoga, wonderful embodied yoga teacher Tara Judel, who does really good stuff. And I was in her class and she's doing asana and everyone was fine. I was, you know, struggling along like the slightly tubby middle-aged man I am, but, you know, getting in. She took one look at me and knew I was an embodiment person. And then she put some music on and started moving to, say, free dance. And 50% of the people there just didn't know what to do. Like this sort of very fit, mostly young women, and they were just sort of stiff. So they were flexible. They could put their feet behind their head probably, but they couldn't dance. And they couldn't express themselves and they felt embarrassed to. And she had to really encourage them just to do even slightly more free movements. And I remember thinking that was surreal because I've danced for years. And these people, were, like, they didn't have that expressive capacity or that free capacity. The same with like social things. So, you know, yoga would be great for developing body awareness, self-regulation, you know, a couple of skills there. Well, I go to yoga. But then what about the social side? Does it really make you a better leader, more empathic? Does it mean you can tune into others better? Now, as yoga teachers, that's kind of in the teaching side a little bit, you know, paying attention to the class, though I have known teachers who didn't. But as a practice, it's primarily a solo practice. Now, there are exceptions, acro yoga, party yoga. And I think that's where acro really took off because it was meeting another need.
Yes.
It was helping, you know, playfulness was there, which... now, I'm sorry, this isn't part of a traditional Iyengar class.
No,
yeah,
it's
like now. You know, I once went to an Iyengar yoga class in Zurich. And,
oh my God, even in Zurich.
Exactly how that sounds. And I remember thinking, yeah, this is great, but everybody has OCD. And if I wanted to be more disciplined and controlling, this would be a great place to go.
Yeah.
But if I was trying to work on something else, like, you know, being free and expressive, this would be a terrible place to go. And unfortunately, most people deepen their neurosis with their practice, you know, whether it's me in martial arts or, you know, I'm not immune to this. And rounding it out, both from a skill set point of view, but also from a sort of quality of embodiment you're developing, like you used the 4 elements model earlier, you know, water, earth, you know, whatever, is really, really helpful. So I really encourage all my students who come in as professionals in any field, Tai Chi, whatever, to take up a supplementary art, and it just gives them another point of view, or else the danger is fundamentalism as well. You know, like some people, they and I get it sort of comes from a good place, because maybe let's say you take up karate or you take up, I don't know, Ashtanga, and you do Ashtanga and it really helps you, and it makes you healthier and it makes you feel better. So you go, right, everyone should do Ashtanga, and Ashtanga is the only way. And that's actually not even true for you, because it changes over the years, let alone for everybody else. So I really encourage, you know, I'm a kind of jack of all trades. You know, I've done 25 years of yoga, but I'm not a yoga teacher. You know, martial art, dance, all these things. So how they all kind of fit together. And with me, it's like, what do I need now for what?
Mm-hmm.
There's a few pieces there, you know.
I really love what you just said, like this, and I really want to underline that this, hey, even though you have maybe your own embodiment practice with yoga or with martial arts or something like that, when you just do that and you actually supports your neurosis and you're actually like your strength already, and it doesn't, and you won't support your weaknesses actually. So doing a practice actually that supports you in the way where your weaknesses are, and even build them as strength. I really love that. And also being like more flexible in seeing different ways and being open to different ways.
And I think things have got better. Like when I first started yoga, my mum taught yoga, so I've done it since I was a kid. Like the average yogi didn't know much else, whereas now they might be trauma informed, they might have done some 5 rhythms, they might have at least tried Tai Chi. You know, the average yoga studio now will have things going on. It might have TRE shaking going on, it might have a dance class once a week. And I do see a sort of increased open-mindedness. Like when you ask a yogi now, what style of yoga do you do? Nearly always they go, well, you know, this, but that, it depends. And it's like, that used to just be like, I do Iyengar, I do Ashtanga. Yeah? Right. And now you get this slightly more open-mindedness within yoga with the different styles of yoga, but also I think beyond that into the kind of embodiment scene more generally. I think the thing that's sometimes a bit different about yoga with it is there's I don't want to insult your listeners, but there's a dishonesty. So a dishonesty about aim. So someone will be doing yoga for a nice ass, but saying it's to be spiritual. And telling everyone else and even themselves, and you'll see this on Instagram, it'll be like, here's my signal, and they'll be leaning forwards and there'll be like a cleavage shot, and I'm like, okay, you're selling your body, which is fine, you know, it's low-level sex work, that's okay, I'm not going to shame you for that, but let's just be honest about what that is. And then they'll be like, you know, if I say anything, they'll be like a feminist critique and your body shaming me. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that, I'm just saying be honest. So there's a sort of a spiritual veneer that can get kind of plastered on top of things. So it's like, is this a health and beauty? Like one of my questions is, if your yoga made you fat, would you still do it? Right? Yes. And then you get real honest, people can try and help people get more honest about their practice. Like what? And so well, it's for everything. And it's like, no, it's not, because the method follows the aim and it's optimized for something. So it might be a combination of things. Like I mostly go to one class I go to for more spiritual reasons, but there's also some physical benefits to it, you know. Yes. But I mostly go to the gym for physical reasons, but there's some other benefits to it. So we're optimizing for something, and I think it's about being really honest about that, both in ourselves and our marketing. And yoga is the place where I see that least honest. Like if you go to the gym, go, what are you trying to do? Like, I'm trying to lose weight. Yeah. Right, whereas that is sometimes a bit hidden in the background in the yoga world.
But don't you think that's actually a thing in the whole wellness industry? Like I don't find that only in the yoga industry. Like I lived in Bali, and there's so many hippie spiritual, I'm a healer now because I have my own healing journey ideas, people. And
yeah, sure.
Yeah, and I watched that a lot about people who are like talking about how liberated they are with sexuality, and they're in the tantra and conscious community, and they are actually just selling their body.
Oh yeah, I mean, there's plenty of, you know, insecure tantra girls who want attention, and long-haired boys from Germany who can't get laid any other way. You know, I'm sorry to be a total bitch about this, but it's pretty hilarious when you're in somewhere like Thailand and Bali. I've been those places. I'm like, come on, dude, be honest. You're just trying to get laid. That's okay, man, but be honest. Yes. So yeah, I think there are these ways people defend their self-esteem or kind of justify things. And I think just, again, I'm just really, a big value for me is honesty and authenticity. And, you know, for some people, it's just like financial side. They're like, hey, I'm going to get more likes and sell more courses if I show myself off this way. And, you know, it's like, okay, well, you know, you're doing what you want to do, and let's be a bit more honest is all I'm asking.
Yeah. I know what you mean. It's the same with the yoga, like Instagram bubble, where everyone is doing handstand and headstand and doing the arm balances. And you're like, is that really the aim for me. And I had a hard time in Bali because everyone in Bali in the yoga classes are doing the fancy arm balances and handstand. And I was like, this is not why I'm going to yoga class.
Yeah, and you know, it's hard to know from looking at something, because someone could be doing a handstand in order to really work with their edge and fear and how they do this. And, you know, mostly though, it's about how it looks.
Yes.
You know, it's if a yogi does an arm balance in a forest and no one's looking, do they still really do it? You know, so to distort a classic philosophical thing. And I think it's also the medium. So if we're mostly promoting ourselves through visual medium like Instagram, and I'm on Instagram, there's a temptation there to have visual pictures.
Yes.
Right? Like, I know if I have a picture of my top off looking good, then it's going to get more likes than one where I'm not. And I think that is a constant temptation for us. And where we place ourselves ethically in that, I think it's down to each individual to choose.
Yeah, that's true. Thank you for pointing that out, Mark, because I think that's something that people don't speak enough about. And it's something that always bothers me when I even my Bali friends, and I see their pictures and I'm like, I know who you really are. And it's like, damn it.
Yeah. And as I said, there's these weird defenses that are sort of pseudo-spiritual or pseudo-feminist or whatever that are kind of layered on top of that. So, and this actually, you know, replicates some very old gender dynamics that exist, which is don't name the game, and if you name the game, you lose the game.
Yes.
So and I think it's a replication of some very old stuff that's not particularly healthy. Yes. And you know, like even saying this on your podcast, you might get people complaining and saying Mark's sexist and he's body shaming women or whatever. It's like, no, I'm not. Come on. Anyway, let's move on from this. I'm bored of it.
Yes, I was just wondering, because now we bitched about it, what could be the solution for it? Like, if there's a yoga teacher listening and they are saying like, yes, Mark, yes, I'm with you there. And that's not why I do marketing. That's not why I put myself out there, because I don't want to support this kind of bubble. How can they find, or how can they make it differently?
There's lots of great ways to do marketing. I mean, one friend of mine is a movement teacher, sort of Ido Patel type stuff. There's Daniel, is in London, a Croatian guy. And he's just recently found out that he can do really well by just making funny videos about movement. And he's not selling himself in the normal way, like lifestyle or, you know, body beautiful or whatever. He just brings a sense of humor to it, which really, and it's really authentic for him because he's a funny guy, and it just suits him. So he's gone down that path. So for him, that feels more authentic and more ethical, and is actually being more successful for him than what he was doing previously. So that's just one example. I mean, I'm just myself as well. It's funny, often people on my social media say, oh, you're so provocative, they'll say, and I'll say, I'm way fucking worse in real life. Like, I'm toning it down. This isn't me putting on an act. Like, behind closed doors, it's way more extreme. And like, for me, there's just an authenticity to it, and which I think is useful. And if there's a gap between what you're putting on your social media or whatever and how you actually are, people will be disappointed when they meet you. Right? Like, they'll be like, hey, you don't actually quite look like that, or you don't seem that interested in that, or your values seem quite different. So if you want to actually attract the people you really want as students long term, you have to be honest.
Yes, that's true. I would like to change the subject back to embodiment, and actually how an embodiment practice, like if you have already one and you're now choosing a one that is supporting your weaknesses, or like dissolve your weaknesses, supports them, that you could even weaken them. What is, from your experience, a benefit of it? What's a benefit to actually do that?
Freedom, range, being less of a dick. So if we keep doing what we've always done, we'll get what we've always got, right? And why do we keep doing what we've always done? Because we keep being what we've always been. Yeah, so there's actually a third layer underneath that common saying. So by building range, we build more possibility. Yeah. And that could be possibilities in your parenting, your marriage, your business, whatever. You'll actually see the world differently. Also, for me, it's part of just not narrowing my humanity, right? To a particular, like, you see kids, they'll have all the emotions in 2 minutes, you know? And even in their posture, it's very open and free because there's lots of possibilities for them. They're not embodied tightly in a particular way. And then usually as people get older, they get narrower and narrower in their possibilities and stiffer in their embodiment, literally and figuratively. Where that sort of childhood flexibility, literally and figuratively, is lost. And I think that behavioral flexibility is key. And so it's an interesting word, because in English, flexible actually means two things. It means range of motion, and it means the ability to do different things. And yoga focuses on the first definition.
Right.
Yeah, of flexibility. So like, and it doesn't really matter how long your hamstrings are, right? I mean, at the end of the day, I'd also say it's like an embodied approach to yoga or anything else is probably more aligned with most people's actual values. Like I make the joke sometimes I'm teaching embodied yoga. I'm like, I put my phone on the floor and be like, how long do my hamstrings need to be? And I'll pick up my phone and say that long, right? If I can tie my shoelaces, they're long enough. Right. Like there's no actual, I mean, unless I'm going to chew my toenails, there's not much benefit in having really open hips for me. Yeah, right. It's
true.
And how strong do I need to be? Like, what's the benefit of me for doing a handstand? Like, practically, it doesn't really come up in life, right? I need to be strong enough to pick up my niece from the ground. I need to be well enough that I don't get sick and I have lots of energy for work. That's great. So well-being is the foundation. But well-being in a way is sort of limited. It's like, okay, great, you're well. Most of the yogis I know are pretty physically well. And then it's beyond that. It's like, yeah, but what can you do in your life? What's possible for you? And, you know, like, and this is about intention and how you're holding things. Like you could be doing a chaturanga to develop an anterior deltoid. You know, always spot the vinyasa people because they have these big anterior deltoids. I'm like, you know, slow clap, well done. Why? But or you can be doing a chaturanga to practicing boundaries. You know, this is what we would call no pose. There's a pushing away in that. Yeah. Yes. And yin pose, again, you know, you say you're doing yin yoga, you can be practicing yin yoga to open your hips, but again, beyond a reasonable amount needed for, say, sex, like why? Or you could actually be practicing opening as a person. And I think these are different things. And one's fundamentally more useful because when I ask people, what do you care about? They don't say flexible hamstrings. Right. They say their families and their businesses and their love life and, you know, politics. They say these things. So I would suggest if we have a physical practice which is not supporting those things, we may be missing a trick.
I feel like for me, my yoga journey actually taught me to be more flexible. The more flexible I became in my body, the more I actually became flexible in my mind. And
do you think that's common? Because most of the yogis I know aren't very flexible in their mind.
You think so?
No, like they're pretty rigid.
Yeah.
Not most, but I certainly don't see, like if I think of, maybe not most, and maybe that's unfair. I know there's a lot of kinds of yoga, a lot of kinds of people, and I'd say I regularly do yoga myself. If you're listening to this, I'm not kicking your kitten, okay?
Yeah, please. My audience is yoga
people
teachers.
People sometimes get a bit defensive about their practice. And I'm just as hard on martial arts, by the way. It's just a different set of pathologies. Or, you know, conscious dance. It's just, if I was on a conscious dance podcast, I'd be talking about what's not like conscious dance is often like discipline, for example, right? Because they're all about freedom. The head's going, I'm free, my life's a mess. So, you know, I might be hard on everyone, but it's I'd say be honest, like honestly, when people take up, let's say, an average vinyasa yoga class, do they become more flexible as people? I have not seen that.
Yeah, that's true.
If anything, I've seen the opposite.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I'm right now, I'm letting it sink in. I noticed that in my body. It's like this feeling of like, you're kicking my kitten. And this feeling of like,
I'm not, I really like it.
Right.
I take my wife to Jim Tarran's yoga class, the Buddhist Center, once a week. It's yoga date night. We both love it. Jim Tarran of Brighton, excellent yoga teacher, the only one in Brighton that my wife Daria tolerates. Also Gary Carter, actually, he's very good. And Pete Blackaby's also very good. We've got lots of good yoga teachers here that I go to regularly because yoga's brilliant, but it's also not everything.
Yeah, it's not everything. That's true. And it's true with this feeling of, I remember the times when the first time I went to an ecstatic dance as a yogi and I was there, I was like, this is really weird. Where are the person who's telling me how to move? Like,
tell me what to do, daddy. It's I mean, yoga's the most weird S&M thing ever, really, isn't it? Like people get really obedient doing yoga because they get told what think of what you're practicing in a yoga class. You're practicing obedience.
Yes.
You're practicing being told. And people say, listen to your body, but what do they mean by that? Is there really encouragement for that? With some teachers, there is more than others, right?
Mm-hmm.
But mostly what it is one person telling everyone else how to sit, stand, breathe, and move.
Yes. And I notice that I'm always saying, like, it's an invitation, what I'm saying. But also, if somebody is not doing what I'm saying, I notice that in me. It's like this, you're not doing what I'm saying right now. And
There's the control freak part, right?
myself.
Well, also think about teaching yoga as a practice. You're practicing telling everyone exactly what to do.
Yes.
And you do meet those sort of controlling yoga mums who are like, do this, Johnny, this is the thing to eat your sandwich this way. And it's like, yeah, I'm going to be practicing that all day long. Like, we become what we practice. So really, I just ask people listening, like, what are you practicing in yoga? Not physically, but as a way of being. And I'm, using the authority side of things there. And I've really taken this apart. And so, so I have a few other people now that there's a politics to that as well. And there's certainly something you're becoming better at. So you could get really better at saying no in yoga by, when the teacher asks you to do something, checking in with yourself and going, do I really want to do this right now? And if you don't, not doing it. And then you'll feel that social pressure to do it, because everybody, it's funny, my main teacher, Jim, he really doesn't mind if I don't do a pose or if I change a pose. I've been going there 20 years, right? So he's chill with me. He really genuinely doesn't mind, but the other students do. So when I'm there, if I decide I'll just take a rest, for example, I'll just go, it's been a long day. I just lie on my back with my knees up for a couple of poses. I can't be asked for another downwards dog. Who gives a shit? So I'll just lie there. And the other students will be looking at me like, why isn't he doing it correctly? And that's actually, even as someone that's got quite a good no, that's quite a good chance for me to practice that, like, I'm going to be true to myself here.
Yes. I did that too. Like, for me, listening to authority as a German is a very important thing. And I practice it with my yoga teachers to disobey. And it's hard for Germans, I feel. It's hard.
Yeah, there's lots of cultural stuff here. And, we have this system called Embodied Yoga Principles, where we have 26 different poses that represent different things. Some of them are traditional yoga poses. About 2/3 of them aren't. 2/3 of them being imported from elsewhere or developed independently. Like, we have a joker pose and a sensuality pose and a giving pose that you won't find. You could include them in a vinyasa, but they're not normally. And, when I go to different countries, it's interesting that people have different responses to them. I did a self-care pose one place and the whole room just burst out into tears. So we're really seeing the differences culturally that do exist in those poses, in the way that people struggle with them or enjoy them. And that's an even more accurate way of looking at what we're talking about with styles. There's certain styles of yoga that develop in different places.
I would like to talk at the end about your engagement in the Ukraine right now.
Sure.
I find that, like, I got aware of you being involved in the Ukraine war right now, not in the war, but like in the supporting the people there through the training where I am right now in. And you also offered some trainings about that. And I'm curious where this is coming from. There's so many embodiment yoga teachers who are like looking at that, writing a Facebook post and saying like, this is not good, more peace in the world, and singing Shanti Shanti, but you're somebody who's going there.
Yeah, I mean, that was easy for me anyway. So my day job is training coaches and movement teachers of different kinds, right? Like the coaching courses we do and the other courses we do. But I've worked with trauma for quite a while. One of my main mentors, Paul Linden, is a trauma teacher. And I'd worked in a bunch of areas of conflict before, doing NGO work, resilience training and trauma work for NGOs. I first got involved in Ukraine, just I was doing a coaching job there. And then the war broke out. This was, it must be 7 or 8 years ago now. So it was after the Maidan protests. I was actually there for those. And then the war started in the east. So what the big war that's happening now is a continuity of a smaller war, effectively. And I was asked to teach some trauma work. I said, okay, there's not much money in it, but why not? Okay, fine. People needed it. And I actually met my wife there, who's Daria, who's an interpreter. She was my interpreter at the time. I think it was a setup, but happens. Obviously, I found out my wife. She eventually moved to the UK after various visa problems and things. And then when this invasion happened, I really just felt like I wanted to do something. And my first instinct was actually to go and fight. You know, I'm a bit of a fighter at heart, but I'm not particularly a good soldier. So one of my friends pointed out that I should probably go and do some trauma work instead. And I was like, yeah, good idea. Thanks, Alex. And so, yeah, I basically, within the first few weeks of the war starting, went out there and we delivered some medical supplies, we raised money for that, and then I taught a whole bunch of trainers to work with trauma, because I thought it'd be more constructive if I taught other people in terms of the impact. And so we're in contact with local therapists, and they were like, look, we're swamped, we're overwhelmed, but actually it would be really helpful just to have people that were telling the basics of trauma education to people. Been out there twice now, both times, you know, literally under rocket fire. So it was only in Lviv, so it wasn't the front lines, but it was still pretty stressful. And eventually I gave the charity over to 2 local women who now run it, Kate and Jenny, who are awesome, and over 100 trainers working for them now. They just finished training 3,000 school teachers, which is all the teachers in Lviv. So Lviv now has the most trauma-aware education system in the world.
Wow.
And they're now started on 9,000 doctors last week. So doctors and nurses. So they're going to make, you know, the vision really is to make Ukraine the most trauma-aware country in the world. And they're
Incredible.
doing the girl, you know, I'm an advisor now. I do supervision, I do online classes. We have a Sane Ukraine Online, which if anyone's listening has Ukrainian friends or is Ukrainian, that's in Ukrainian every single day of the week. And it's a sort of free trauma education and support class online. And then the trainers on the ground are teaching people who are, you know, in need. So yeah, it's a bit long-winded, but I hope that gives you the gist of it.
Thank you, Mark, for that. Like, I really appreciating that. I think for me, if I wouldn't have known more about trauma much more earlier, I think my life would have been so much different. So much different.
Yeah, I mean, I think, God, if my education system that I went through was trauma-informed, you know, I was a kid that grew up with trauma, and it would have made a huge difference to my own life. And, you know, I was treated by teachers, for example, and, you know, I think it's just a missing piece of education that should be absolutely basic. And, you know, the whole world's becoming more trauma-informed. You know, and I've interviewed most of the world's top trauma teachers through the conference and things like that. We have them as guests, and Stephen Porges, for example, was very supportive of the project. David Baselli was very supportive of TRE. They're great guys. You know, trauma world's got a bit funny. It's all got a bit sort of middle class and political. And, you know, when I first got interested in trauma, no one knew about it. It's like being into a band before they were cool. But it's now
OG.
Yeah, OG, exactly. That's cool. But now it's big business. You know, trauma is really big business. The trauma teachers are the world's best paid embodiment teachers.
Oh wow.
And and in terms of the numbers of people they bring in, and some of them won't get out of bed for thousands of dollars on the table, you know. And it's also highly politicized in a really unhealthy kind of way. Unfortunately, the sort of far left kind of neo-Marxist approach has really infiltrated, and I use that word advisedly, the trauma world, and everyone's a victim. Everyone's worrying about silly little things, to be honest. And it's a bit brutal to say it, but when you're in Ukraine and dealing with like hardcore trauma, it all just seems a bit ridiculous. So on the one hand, I've seen the trauma world blossom, and great. It's good that we're becoming more trauma aware as a society. It's a wonderful thing. And that also there's some sort of weirdness that's come with it, I've noticed.
That's fascinating. I wasn't aware of that, because like I feel like the basic people that I'm dealing with right now, like being back in Germany, they are not really trauma aware. And they are not really aware that things what happened in their childhood actually have an effect on their day-to-day life, and that they're still stuck in their trauma pattern.
Yeah, I mean, people don't realize it. People act out their whole life, you know, like with addictions. Look at Gabor Mate's work. I mean, with the levels of immigration you've had from areas of conflict in Germany, I mean, it's absolutely necessary. I would say Germany takes a look at trauma as a field, and in a way which is accessible to people. The sort of radicalized Berlin style might not be accessible to most of the country, I would say. And it's sort of very critical, very political, and I think it needs to be in, you know, when we teach soldiers or children in Ukraine, which again, then 2 other groups we work with in Ukraine, we've got to put it in pretty down to earth language. and not bring some hardcore agenda other than helping people.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would like it to become more and more commonplace in that way. And I think it will. Like, it's really encouraging to me what's happened in yoga. I'll say something nice about yoga. So when I first got into yoga, like, it was really normal for teachers to not have any consent, like around touch or adjustments, for example. Like, I remember one time in a major London yoga studio, I was in downwards dog, and the teacher kind of snuggled up behind me and like took my hips in her hand and like adjusted me in a sort of doggy style type position, is the only way to describe it. And it was just deeply inappropriate. And there's another time I said to a teacher, stop adjusting me. And she said, I know what I'm doing, and continued. And I'm like, okay, that's actual non-consensual abuse at that point.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, God, if it's hard for me as a guy who's fairly non-compliant Irish background, you know, how much more hard would it be for people that have learned to be good girls, you know?
Yes. Or good boys.
Yeah, there's a gender pattern there. But it's and I thought, this is awful. And since the 20 years, it's probably like 10 years ago, those two things happened. Now I'm seeing a much better consent culture in yoga, for touch and adjustment and things like that. And like, it seems like people are becoming aware of sort of nervous system health. And, you know, it's quite trendy in a way, but I think that's really cool that like, your yoga is well ahead of martial arts, for example, in that sense. So that's cool to see that the yoga world has really taken that on board. Because it's not, this will upset a few people as well, it's not Asian. Trauma awareness is mostly a Western edition. Now, there are some great teachers from around the world and tribal perspectives on it from traditional, you know, ethnicities and things, but it's mostly a Western psychotherapeutic edition. And that's a wonderful addition, I think. And I think it's necessary to balance out the potential abuse in guru culture that we unfortunately inherited. Without the cultural context to support that. So yeah, awesome that that's becoming a thing now.
Yeah, that's true. And I actually had in Bali an experience with being adjusted in a way that was very unhealthy. And I complained about that, and he never, like, he now learned to be like, I complained in my way, in a very don't do that ever again kind of way. And I think he learned from it.
Yeah. And I think it does require people that can be direct like that, give that feedback and say, because it's not always easy.
Yes,
it's not
100%.
always easy for people. And you know, I remember when I did make a complaint once about this, and I was shaking when I did it. I thought, God, I'm supposed to be pretty good with this stuff, and it's not the easiest thing, because there's a lot of weight to that kind of compliance and teacher role and the norm. There's a much more weight to conformity than people realize. To actually complain about something is not so easy. So often when I'd say someone, if you know, you're the one that complained, you probably there's probably 10 other people that tolerated it before you.
Yes.
Didn't enjoy it, right?
Yes. I know.
And I've also seen teachers take it on board really well. And I've said, hey, you know, can you ask if you want to do that to me? And if I say no, please don't do it. And some teachers take that on board really well, and they've just inherited things from their teachers, because you know, Patabi Joyce or whoever was doing worse to them in Mysore, and they didn't no one could complain then. They might not even share the language or whatever. So I think things are improving in that way, and so I think that's positive. Yeah,
that's very positive. That's true. We are at the end of this interview. I have 3 more questions for you that you...
Hit me, quick fire.
Yeah, quick.
I got 13 minutes.
3 questions, and I actually have them from Authentic Relating, and I really love them. So please end the sentence. If you would really know me, you would know.
If you would really know me, you would have had to have danced, fucked, or fought me. So listening to this, you don't really know me.
Okay. What I'm afraid to share with others is?
Probably like some of the realities of... God, this is really forced vulnerability, isn't it, these questions? Pushing people over the vulnerability cliff. Some of the realities of running an online business in this space, pretty brutal. I share some of that. But I'm pretty open as a person. Like, I'd probably overshare, if anything. A question for me that would probably be more helpful is, what do you share that you shouldn't share? So, Oversharing is another social media issue, actually, but that's another story. What's the last one?
Something I want to be seen, appreciated for is.
Yeah, and the urge to want to be seen and appreciated, I think that could become very unhealthy very quickly. Honestly, often days I want to be more invisible.
Okay.
If I'm honest, like I get recognized, and mostly in a sort of positive way. The internet is a little bit visible. Yeah, I'm having the fantasy of going and living in the woods and being less visible at the moment. Though I guess I'd like to be seen as someone who's, as you introduced me at the beginning, not just provocative, but also kind of kind and, you know, actually more the balance of you, which is more how I am. The provocative bit often stands out because it's less usual, but it's not like my whole character. So probably would appreciate being seen in a more balanced way, shall we say.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much, Mark. It was a virtual eating cake with you.
It was a pleasure. Shall I say where people can find out our stuff if they?
Yes, I will put everything in the show notes about your podcast. Maybe you can just mention again your book and your podcast and how people
if
can get in
people
touch
put
with
the
you.
word embodiment, if people put the word embodiment into the internet, I'll probably come up. So Embodiment Podcast, Embodiment Book on Amazon, and our main company is called Embodiment Unlimited. And if people there, we have free ebooks, free classes, free videos, like a whole bunch of stuff on embodiment, loads of free resources. So if people go over there, embodimentunlimited.com, they can see all that, and they can see my cleavage and handstands on Instagram at Walsh. I'll just put my name, Mark Walsh, into Instagram.
Perfect. I highly recommend the YouTube channel from you. It's very good stuff on there. And I recommend, from like my own experience, the CAC course, the certification of becoming an embodiment coach. It's a really good training course. Respect, Mark, what you made there. Like, I really appreciating being part of this program.
It's a good little course. Start again in, I think, early Feb. We'll be selling it in January. So yeah, if people are at embodimentunlimited.com, they'll get informed about stuff like that. So.
Cool. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
And have all a good day. Bye.